Good morning, friends. It is Wednesday morning. It is Genesis 49. It is prayer meeting day. It is hump day. We're getting there. One day closer to the Lord's day, one day closer to the Lord's return. I got up at my normal 5 o'clock this morning and had a little bit of prayer time, and I'll finish that in a short bit. And also just really looking forward to Sunday's stuff. Got the next passage in the book of Luke. Tonight will be Psalm 30. So much good stuff. I'm looking forward to seeing so many of you. And if you're watching this on delay, on Wednesday evening, hey, for whatever reason, you could not or did not join us, please go ahead and turn this right on off and get on the church Facebook or YouTube channel and watch the prayer meeting. I hope that those of you who are watching live and will be watching on delay during Wednesday will give serious consideration about joining us. Not everyone can, I understand that. But it is Wednesday. And then let's see here. We have this Sunday morning, we're going to recognize our graduates. So that'll be good. Looking forward to that as well. Transition some of our friends into the Eagle's Nest, our single adults small group / ministry. So good things happening. Here we are, Genesis 49, and hello, Renee, Sharon, Harlan and Rosalie, Lisa, Angelo, Pam, David and Karen, Kim, yeah, all the way from Hickory, and Hazel. It's good to see everyone. It's good to see some of you yesterday, hear from some of you yesterday. Did my heart very, very good. Genesis 49. Jacob called his sons and said, "Gather together that I may tell you what shall befall you in the last days." This is pretty neat. We're about to get a peek from the book of Genesis into what we normally call the last days. There have been a lot of folks who have said, well, the last days, it could be 70 AD, it could be Pentecost, it could be the days of Judas Maccabeus when the temple was crushed. I think for those of us who believe in a Genesis to Revelation unfolding of history, we should probably assume the last days is the last days of these 12 boys. And that doesn't, that goes pretty good into the future. It is the book of Ezekiel that has them mentioned as having plots of land in the new kingdom. It is the book of Revelation that mentions that 12,000 of every tribe will be present. It is the book of Romans that says that there will be a day at the completion of the fullness of the Gentiles that the Jews will be grafted back in. We talked about that on Palm Sunday, I believe. No, we didn't. No, but it was a Palm Sunday passage that happened later in April. So here's a dying man, 147 years old, talking to his boys, and he's about to tell them what will happen to each of them. Here we go. Gather together and hear what will, you sons of Jacob, and listen to Israel your father. Reuben was his firstborn. You are my firstborn, my might and the beginning of my strength, the excellency of dignity, the excellency of power. Listen to this. Unstable as water. You slosh around in life. It doesn't take much to shake you. It could be in the passive sense or the active sense. You're not steady. Life happens to you. You're blown about. You might be in a position of leadership, but you follow. You follow what the masses want. You follow what your family wants. You follow your impulses. There's a ton of ways we can apply this. The exact interpretation, I'm afraid he's about to tell us. Unstable as water, you shall not excel, because you went up to your father's bed. Then you defiled it. And it says, he went up to my, it's as if Jacob He goes from second person pronoun to third person pronoun. He says, you did this, and then he did this, right? So if you thought that people get away with things, this is like basically a man writing his own obituary and filleting his kid in the middle of it. Jacob went to his rest, had 4 wonderful women in his life, except the one that cheated with his son. Gracious. And so Reuben goes to bed with, I think it was Zilpah, which is his mother's handmaiden. And that was in Genesis 35. So lots of strange things happening up in that house. Verse 5, Simeon and Levi are brothers. Cruelty instruments are in their dwelling place. What's that making reference to? Let's keep reading. Let not my soul enter their council. Let not my honor be united to their assembly. For in their danger they slew a man, and in their self-will they hamstrung an ox. Curse be their anger, for the fierce. It is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. So what are we talking about there? Probably Genesis 34. When Simeon and Levi led the assault against the men of Shechem. Do you remember the story of Dinah, chapter 34, when one of the men in Shechem took her, and I guess what amounts to, kind of I think we would call it rape today, but it was a strange thing in the culture then. I don't know what to make of it. I'm glad we've progressed or left that, but Simeon and Levi did not think it was acceptable in any culture to take their sister. So remember Genesis 34, they required the men of Shechem to get circumcised if they were going to have long-term trading and intermarrying relationship with that city, and they got circumcised and they were immobilized. And then they were neutralized. So I believe that's what he's making reference to. So Jacob is making reference to chapter 35 with Reuben and chapter 34 with Simeon and Levi. Now, verse 8. He goes on to son number 4. Judah, you are he whom your brothers shall praise. And by the way, that's what Judah means. Yada. It's built off the name that means to raise the hand. Judah, you are he whom your brothers shall praise. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's children shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, you've gone up. He bows down. He lies down as a lion, and as a lion, who shall rouse him? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh comes, and to him shall be the obedience of the people. Lots to explain here. If this was a Sunday night message, this would be super easy. We would just have these 3 or 4 verses, and then we just explain them, and then we'd take questions. But this has prophetic ramifications. Do you have any questions about this? Yeah, Tori. The compliment, then the burn. Yes. I'd like to give you the good news first. I think you're a swell guy. And then comes the kibosh, right? Well, here's Judah, and you'll notice a couple plays on words. Like I told you, it's a name that is related to the word yada, which means the upraised hand. And here, Jacob says, "Your hand will be on the neck of your enemies." So the blessing is a word play off of his name, and then he talks about him being a lion, and that there would be the scepter will not depart from Judah. So it's going to be the ruling tribe, and until Shiloh comes. Now, Shiloh is a location, especially during the time of Samuel, but it is also a word that means the peace bringer, peacemaker. It's a related word, and so this really is a reference. If you think about this, binding his donkey to the vine and his donkey's colt to the choice vine. What is that? Well, that is a reference to Palm Sunday, okay? It's at least a reference to Palm Sunday. Right here in the book of Genesis, chapter 49, we have a reference to Jesus Christ, the scepter, and the Shiloh, coming out of the tribe of Judah. Right here. That's stellar. That's really good. So we've discussed that Abraham's birth was at approximately 1950 BC. Abraham lived 100 years, and then Isaac was born 1850 BC. Isaac is 60 years old when Jacob is born 1790 BC. Jacob is 147 years old. That means that he is 1543, 1643 BC. So we are approximately 1643 years before Jesus. And we have reference and prophecy of Jesus. Incidentally, if what we said is true, then that means that there's approximately 200 years. Now, did I skip anything? 1850 for Isaac's birth, 1790, 1643. 1643 for Jacob's death. Well, if that's true, then we have about 197 years between Jacob's death and the Exodus. Well, that means that if we have 1643, 1446, 197 years between the two, and Moses is 80 at the Exodus, then you have 117 years between the death of Jacob and the birth of Moses. Pretty wild. So all of that out of the Judah. Now let's go on to the fifth son. Verse 13, Zebulun shall dwell by the haven of the sea. He shall become a haven for ships, and his border shall adjoin Sidon. Issachar is a strong donkey, lying down between two burdens. He saw the rest was good, and that the land was pleasant. He bowed his shoulder to bear a burden, and became a band of slaves. Well, here's a reference either to something that takes place during the time of the book of Genesis with these boys, but probably not, because Jacob told them these would befall you in the last days. But as we saw with the boys already, part of the prophecy is related to the part of what they did in their life. You have no respect for devotions, do you? Go find something to do. Go find something to do. Man. Go on. All right. Where are we? Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Pay attention to this. Dan shall be a serpent by the way, a viper by the path that bites the horse's heels, so that its rider shall fall backward. I have waited for your salvation, O Lord. So here is Jacob basically saying that he's going to judge, yes, but he's also going to be a venomous snake biting at the horse's heels. Some have seen this as a reference to the idea that Dan, whose name does not show up in the book of Revelation as one of the 12 tribes, in fact, his tribe is the producer. And by the way, the focus. His tribe is the producer of the Antichrist. Yeah, his tribe is not listed in Revelation 7 when you have the 144,000 mentioned. And others have thought that his tribe produces, like I said, the Antichrist, and thus that is why the tribe is left out in early Revelation. Not only that, but it has been said that two Jews from the tribe of Dan, Romulus and Remus, I believe is their name. That sounds like a comedy team, but I'm pretty sure I have those names right. Established the city of Rome about 700 years before the Lord. Okay, so on to Gad. Remember, these are being handled in the order in which they were born. Gad, a troop, shall tramp upon him, but he shall triumph at last. So he will be trampled on, but then he will trample others. Verse 20, bread from Asher shall be rich. He shall yield royal dainties. Naphtali is a deer, let loose. He uses beautiful words. Joseph is a fruitful bough by a well. His branches run over the wall. The archers had bitterly grieved him, shot at him, hated him, but his bow remained in strength, and the arms of his hands were made strong from the hands of the mighty God of Jacob. There is the shepherd, the stone of Israel, the mighty God of Jacob. From there is the shepherd, the stone of Israel. So we expect that this Joseph, who has been grieved, will become the bow. Verse 25, by the God of your father who will help you, and by the Almighty who will bless you with blessings of heaven above, and blessings of the deep that lies beneath, blessings of the breasts and of the womb. And the blessings of your father have excelled the blessings of my ancestors up to the utmost bounds of the utter everlasting hills. They shall be on the head of Joseph, and on the crown of the head of him who was separate from his brothers. So because of the character and the favor upon Joseph, we should expect that Joseph will have a major part in ruling in the kingdom to come. Don't forget Matthew 19:28, where it says that the apostles will rule over on thrones the 12 tribes. And so it is no small wonder, if I'm not saying I understand all the significance of everything here, but don't forget that in the New Jerusalem, you have both the apostles and the sons of Jacob mentioned. You have the foundation stones named after the tribes. You have the gates named after the apostles. That's huge. So 24, and then reading backward into Genesis, into Revelation, who are the 24 elders that are seen there? I don't know, but a good guess is probably the 12 sons of Jacob and the 12 apostles. That's my guess, are the 24 elders. This is so easy to deal with. All right, so I got one keeping my leg warm and one keeping my lap warm. All right, so verse number 27. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning he shall devour the prey, and at night he shall divide the spoil. So that's 12 sons. He's gone through and blessed them. How long did this take? Did he think through all of this? Was this on the spot? Was this like improv down at the comedy club? How did he come up with this? Well, he's the grandson of Abraham, the son of Isaac, and he's lived 147 years. Maybe he read off of some parchment, something he originally wrote. I don't know. But he made these pronouncements over his sons. And if he was right about Judah, you have to think that all of these will be correct in some manner. Verse 28, all these are the 12 tribes of Israel. This is what their father spoke to them, and he blessed them. He blessed each one according to his own blessing. Then he charged them and said to them, I am to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephron the Hittite, in the cave that is in the field of Machpelah, which is before Mamre, in the land of Canaan, which Abraham bought with the field of Ephron the Hittite as the possession of the burial place. That's Genesis 23, when he bought that. Then they buried Abraham, Genesis 25, and Sarah, Genesis 23, his wife, where they buried Isaac, and Rebekah, his wife, Genesis 35. And there I buried Leah. Now that's interesting, because we actually don't have a record. In fact, I think I may have forgotten about this verse when I mentioned that Leah probably traveled with them to Egypt. Well, if she did, and she may have, and she probably did, but if she did, then the 17 years between Jacob's arrival in Egypt when he was 130 and Jacob's death in this chapter, or close to it, somewhere in those 17 years, Leah died and they went back to Canaan to bury her. And she's buried right alongside Abraham, Sarah, Isaac. Hmm. And oh, by the way, you're going to find out that eventually all the 12 sons of Jacob will be buried there. You won't find that out in Genesis. You have to get that from Stephen's sermon. Okay, so verse number 32. The field and the cave that is there they purchased from the sons of Heth, otherwise known as the... Anyone? Anyone? The sons of Heth. While you're thinking about that, verse number 33. And when Jacob had finished commanding his sons, he drew his feet up into the bed and breathed his last and was gathered to his people. So we don't know how many days or how many hours it took for Jacob to finally die, but the last act that he did was bless his sons, or pronounce blessing, or give them the what's going to happen at the end, the pronouncement. And he breathed his last. So he stopped breathing, and that back then was death. The sons of Heth were known as Hittites. Okay, so that's another name for the sons of Heth, Hittites. Thus ends chapter 49 of the book of Genesis. Jacob is dead. And the next chapter, which is the last chapter, picks up with Joseph's response to that. Have you got any questions about this chapter? I was checking out the author of the commentary that I've been pushing for 2 months, and Genesis 49's notes are incredibly unimpressive. All right. Heavenly Father, thank you for the great opportunity to study your word. I pray that you would bless us throughout this Wednesday. Help us not to waste any moments. Help us to rely on your strength while we are being efficient. When it's time to rest, help us to do it very well. Help us not to pollute our leisure with trifling amusements. Help us to rest to the glory of God when it's time. Give us forbearance for those that disagree with us. Give us love for those who both agree and disagree with us. Give us tender mercies and days of plenty in the presence of our friends and family. Convert the sinners that we are concerned about. Give us peace and opportunity to witness to them. Lord, I pray that you would purify our hearts today from resentment, irritation, manipulation. I pray that you deliver us from feeling like we have to have the last word. We ask you to bring peace to the Penley family in the loss of her brother. Bring healing to Nancy Davis as she will come home soon. Bring healing to Sally Swanson over her back. Provide the needs of all of our church folk, Lord. And I pray for those who are deciding about church membership, that you'd give them wisdom. Thank you for the lady I met with yesterday. Thank you for the 3 that presented Sunday. Thank you for the 3 who were baptized Sunday. Lord, I pray that you would solidify their walks with you. We give you thanks for loving sinners such as us. And we ask you for your soon return, yes. And that you'd help us to fall out of love with all of the wonderful luxuries that you've given us. Help us to be good stewards, but help us not to be idolaters. In Jesus' name, amen. Oh, you're welcome, Brother John. Leslie, thank you. Have a great one.